Hi, it's Danielle Radojcin. Welcome back to In Talks With for more adventures in visual culture. For this episode, we're in London with the German artist Nicole Wermers at Herald Street's Museum Street space, where she was debuting her striking new exhibition, Tales and Fainters. Best known for her witty sculptural assemblages that dissect class, gender, and the overlooked labour that keeps cities moving, Wermers has long explored the intersections of design, architecture, and social structures. Born in 1971 in West Germany, Wermers moved to London in the 1990s and has lived and worked here ever since. She studied at Central St Martin's and was nominated for the Turner Prize in 2015 for her exhibition Infrastruktur. Her installation, The Violet Revs, representing a fictional female biker gang, is currently on display at Tate Modern. She's also a professor at the Academy of Fine Arts in Munich, and her work continues to offer a sharp, humorous commentary on the shifting landscapes of cities and the invisible forces shaping how we live. Hello,
Hi
Nicole.
there.
How's it going?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you.
I love this room underneath the gallery space where you have your exhibition on at the moment, Tales and Fainters, which is here until the end of June. I think it's really clear from looking at it and from looking at your work that your interest in architecture and spatial hierarchies is evident right across your practice. So how does this exhibition explore these themes?
Yes, so there's kind of two distinct bodies of work in the exhibition, you know, sort of reflecting in the title, Tales and Fainters. And the title of the tales of the title of the show is actually Domestic Tales, and they kind of refer back to an exhibition proposal that I received almost during the pandemic by these sort of curatorial students in Moscow who wanted to do at the Garage Museum, who wanted to do their final exhibition with me. And that exhibition was supposed to be in this amazing kind of 18th century palais in the middle of Moscow, where the sort of very typical kind of like a typical aristocratic household was reflected in the footprint and the sort of, you know, the sort of enfilade of rooms. But everything, including the sort of servants' quarters and stairwells and everything had been turned, and the kitchen, everything had been turned into exhibition space. And so I developed a sort of this idea for sculptures that could be in more than one space. And eventually, which is a sort of idea that I've explored before and that I'm kind of fascinated with anyhow. But then in this sort of strongly segregated kind of household, I kind of came up with this idea of extremely long pet tails coming from the notion of pets being easily able to circumvent class differences, a little bit like artists, actually, it seems. And so I made these sort of tails from fake fur. They kind of, some of them look like cat tails, some of them look like a bit like, still a bit domestic and pet-like, but like you can't quite sort of identify which pet it is. But like they are up to about 20 or 25 meters long, and I show them in sort of different stages of rolled upness, for lack of a better word. So sometimes you have, and they, I should also, of course, mention that the end of the tails, so after the 25 meters, it ends in sort of commercially bought hose wheel or sometimes cable drum. So you have this sort of ready-made element as well as the sort of tails that have been hand-stitched, actually, all 20 or 25 meters of them. And I show them in these sort of, obviously that, and then that show didn't happen because of the Ukraine war, and the tails kind of, you know, but I produced the tails anyway for the last two or 3 years, actually more than that, I think, and they're now installed here at Herald Street. There's two galleries. Herald Street has two galleries. One is in the east, in the actual Herald Street, and this is a sort of the West End branch of Herald Street, I suppose, which is in Bloomsbury. And it used to be an antique shop, I think, or like quite a famous interior designer. Anyway, but it does have that sort of element which I quite like. It's sort of there's something domestic about it, but it's also something open public space like. And it has 2 different floor coverings in the upstairs in the exhibition space, and actually there's a third sort of floor covering here downstairs. And so there is already sort of thresholds, which is a theme that I've always been interested in. So this sort of idea of threshold is already sort of, which is something that I've been interested in for a very long time. It's already sort of part of this architecture or this sort of space. And so my tales are at the moment, sort of crisscrossing or extending over those thresholds, sometimes from one end of the gallery to the other, and sometimes they remain completely rolled up in their sort of dispensers and more like a sort of potential of space or an abstraction of space.
What's the significance of the length of the tales?
So it was important. They kind of refer to a space that isn't there anymore, because obviously that sort of Russian palace was a lot bigger than Herald Street is. But I quite like that idea of sort of, playing with or speculating on a space, both from the past as well as from the future, and the sort of idea of adaptability as well of the tales. Yeah.
Is the mechanic of the hose real?
Yes.
You can lengthen or shorten the tail? Yes,
absolutely. Yeah. You can definitely play with it and have it as short or long as you like. Yes.
I was interested about what you just said about how artists can also circumvent class differences. What did you mean by that?
I kind of knew that you would pick up on that.
That's why you said it. A breadcrumb for me.
It's not actually. No, it's not. I afterwards thought, oh my God, she's definitely going to pick up on that. But yes, I mean, it's something that I've touched a little bit on before, maybe with the sort of an exhibition that's still, no, it's not on anymore, but it just closed at a place called Lismore Castle Arts in about an hour from Cork Island, where I'm, where this beautiful Lismore Castle that has been turned into an art venue. And I did a show in a sort of space that is called St. Carthage Hall, but it's a sort of former church hall, but has been sort of annexated, so to speak, by Lismore Castle Arts. And I kind of sort of there for that particular space, I made something that I've been thinking about for a long time, which is a sort of a relief on the theme of marathon dancers. This sort of mass media phenomena of the 1920s, the sort of Depression era USA, where sort of destitute couples would sort of perform in these endurance dances for cash prizes. And what kind of interested me about that was, the sort of exhausted body, which I'm also actually sort of exploring in this exhibition here at Herald Street. But like in Ireland, it was about that very particular phenomena where these couples sometimes hanging off, most of the time hanging off each other's bodies, one body supporting the other body, were kind of subjected to this, I don't know, early form of exploitative kind of entertainment industry. Something that maybe now happens in shows like reality TV shows like Love Island or something, where sort of working class people are exploited for mass entertainment purposes. And in a way, I mean, and that I did that relief because it is a very sculptural, because all these images that you find online about these sort of marathon dancers it's such a sculptural theme, this sort of one body hanging off the neck of another. And also the sort of horizontal narrative of these sort of like, so I produce a relief that is mounted on these sort of folded up bistro tables, and so that it's a long, you can read it from left to right as a sort of, as you go along, but it represents also one dance floor where all these couples will be dancing. But so the sort of main subject of this is entertainment as labor. So coming back to this with all this blah blah, coming back to what you asked, the sort of entertainment as labor is something that is very much part of this. Artists sort of circumventing class differences in some sort of way, and I thought it was interesting to do that in Lismore with this sort of castle aristocracy kind of background there in a way, yeah. But it's not the main. I also want to stress that it's there's always so many. It takes me a long time to make work in a way, or like I kind of sit on it for a long time, and then by the time I finally make it, there's so many reasons for it that it's kind of hard to say which one was the sort of most important one. But this one, the sort of artists as sort of laborers in a sort of class war is not the main sort of theme, but the main theme was really this sort of very sculptural. Because it's a bit like, counterpoise in classical sculpture, like where one leg is a play leg, one leg is a support leg. But this happens in one couple. You have one person and very often it was the women who kept standing and the men who were like hanging off their necks.
Yeah, like they look like three-legged race, the three-legged race from sports days when they're running.
I don't think we quite did that in Germany, but I know what it is. So I know what it is. Yeah.
Did you have egg and spoon?
Yes. No, I mean, yes, we did, but like maybe in kindergarten, not so much in school sports. Oh gosh, I don't want to come across as anti-British though.
Don't worry, you've lived in London long enough. I think also the figures that from the Lismore Castle, from the dance competition sculptures have this very... the physical sculptures are very have the imprint of your hands on them. They're very physically made, and similar here with the fainters here. And it's clear that you have this desire to put imprint of the human touch onto the material of the sculpture, which is really in contrast to the other pieces like the hose or the fake fur, which are very human made and synthetic. I know you're interested in textures and surfaces and textures and so on, and are you thinking about the sort of haptic element of the art when you're making it, and this contrast between the human touch, and then the synthetically made touch, and then on top of that, this idea that we're actually looking at so much of stuff through screens or AI now. Anyway, does that make it more important to have the human imprimatur?
I think there's definitely an element of that. I got quite bored with sort of. Because in the past, there's quite a sort of like a break in my practice in a way. Oh God, I hate that word practice, but there it is. I said
what do we say instead of practice? Process?
Yeah, in my work. So in my a break in my work, which is sort of pre and post pandemic in a way, and I had a lot of work fabricated pre pandemic, although I still did sort of work by hand as well, but I kind of just generally got a bit bored with that, and also the amount of stuff and how easy it is to just sort of and I kind of became increasingly interested in this sort of notion of the reclining female during the pandemic, and not so much through the idea of sickness, but rather sort of just lying around a lot, I suppose, and a sort of active state of reclining. And then out of that, in a way, came a series of works called Reclining Females, which are sort of large figurative sculptures made from plaster that kind of lie on top of maintenance carts and service trolleys that you would find in an airport or a sort of hotel corridor. And sort of that sort of touching on that subject of maintenance workers from the perspective of a privileged artist sort of led to, or just when I was, because as very often this work started with taking photographs, and I had taken in the past lots of photographs of these service cards. And then just, being fascinated with them as the sort of tools that link working bodies to the architecture they maintain. But but when I then came up with this sort of to depict actual workers involved in this sort of service and maintenance industry, I kind of felt that I had to, I don't know, do it myself and sort of hands-on, make that quite a physical thing in a way as well. I worked as a hotel maid, I think it's still called, which is insane. I mean, it's just so horrible, that word. It's really hard to say, yeah. But I worked in a hotel like that during my studies in Hamburg. And so I knew the physicality of the work very well, and the sort of almost performance-like kind of way that you clean a room and sort of depersonalize a room. And so, I did feel I could tackle this, but I kind of felt that I should do it in a way that maybe I hadn't done before. So out came these sort of quite large kind of figurative sculpture, also something that I'd never done before. And this sort of working with plaster sort of, it has its own kind of rules, because the plaster sort of cures in like 5 minutes, and so you have to work really fast and very almost gesture-like.
And then it becomes too hard?
And then it becomes hard. You can stretch that time with like about 3 more minutes with baking soda, but that's it. Wow. Yeah. So this is
Do you enjoy having that self-imposed deadline where you have to move very quickly?
I didn't at the beginning. No, I hated it. Yeah, because that's just not at all what I'm used to. But then I kind of embraced it in a way. Yeah. And so that's kind of how the whole sort of surface, kind of more amorphic kind of surface, irregular material, heavy surface started. And then I did, I did a small series out of clay, reclining females that are sort of balancing on little stacks of kind of support products that kind of surround us, like, I don't know, painkillers and chocolate and antidepressants and hormone gels. And then I did the relief, which, and then by then I kind of also felt that, oh yeah, I've got this, sort of a bit more confident maybe. And then now I've just done this group of fainting women that you find upstairs, yeah.
And that's also
that's clay as well, clay. Yeah. It's all
so
made by hand.
You prefer the clay or the plaster?
I prefer the clay, yeah.
Yeah, because that stays. You can work with that a little bit.
You can work that was for a long time, as long as you wish. You can just keep it moist.
After?
And mine are so far not fired, no. Oh, but it is reinforced.
Okay, very breakable.
Air dry clay, and as long as it's fine.
So you don't want. So they're sort of, the figures are half. You've called them fainters, and they are in sort of various stages of about to faint.
Yeah, halfway faint. Yeah,
halfway faint. So you wouldn't want them to fall on the ground and smash. But I read about a little bit about the fainters somewhere on the website, I think, of the gallery. And I actually hadn't realised that this whole fainting thing for women in the 18th, 19th centuries was kind of, for the bigger part, an act. And because I did always think,
I think it was a mix, actually. Yeah. I mean, I think it probably started with people actually. I mean, they had to wear like ridiculous, corsets and sort of restricting any body function, and blood flows to the brain. So I'm sure there was a lot of actual fainting, or there was some actual fainting as well. But I think by the 19th century that had developed to this sort of fainting craze, where I mean, it was only women who was fainting all the time. And I mean, yes, the dress, but I think it also had to do with this sort of, because it was perceived almost, as a sort of illustrating their delicateness and their refinement, that in the face of, I don't know, the urban condition or, a carriage going by or male attention, they would just sort of, fall to the floor.
It's funny.
It is very funny, yeah. It's just, I mean, they kind of fainted all the time. There's a piece of furniture designed for women to faint.
Yes.
The fainting couch.
It's
yeah.
Because that's another theme that I've noticed in your work, because you're obviously addressing very serious socio-political themes. There's usually humour embedded in it. For example, the fur tails, there's something sort of almost cartoonish. Is that something you seek to do deliberately as a kind of counterbalance to the more serious elements?
I think, I don't know. I don't think I do it so very consciously, actually. That's just how they're both interests of mine. And I think they just quite naturally come together. And a friend of mine recently said that my superpower was to make serious things seem light or something. So, that's
what a great superpower to have in this day and age. And also just in art. Do you want people to view the work and for it to bring a smile to their face? Is that something that you're looking for?
And what I'm looking at is I quite like sort of darker humor, I suppose, and I quite like sort of for them to initially laugh and then kind of sort of, I don't know, sort of almost like throw up. Not throw up, that's not the word, but like kind of be startled in their laugh, and sort of, I'm sort of, can't quite find the right word at the moment, but like that in Germany you would say, das Lachen bleibt ihm im Hals stecken. So their laughter, it forms a knot in their throat or something, like they initially laugh and then they realize, ooh, or something. Yeah, but like dark humor is definitely, and this is why I feel so at home here, maybe in the UK, because I feel that is part of the DNA here.
Yeah. So what I know I would love to hear a bit about the journey that brought you to London when you studied at Central St. Martin's. Mm-hmm. You grew up in West Germany.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I grew up in a small town in West Germany. I went to art called Emstetten, close to Münster. I went to art school in Hamburg initially. I studied with Sigmar Polke and Klaus Böhmler. And I had in 1999, I got a scholarship by the German Exchange Service to London for Central St. Martin's, where I did an MA in fine art. And then I kind of didn't really want to leave, but then I kind of ran out of money, went back to Hamburg for half a year, came back to the UK, ran out of money again, went back to Hamburg for half a year, and then I kind of came back in 2003 with a Delfina studio grant, which was one of these sort of residencies in Bermondsey. And then I managed to make it somehow work. So I've been here ever since.
Hmm. What was your upbringing like? What did your parents do, and what where was it? My father worked for a sort of roof tile company, selling roof tiles. His brother was a tailor. My grandfather was a tailor. My grandfather on my mother's side was a carpenter. And I grew up in a sort of bungalow on the premises of the company that my dad worked for. And our lawn, or the sort of lawn in front of the house, was dotted with displays for roof tiles. So there were like mini roofs with sort of various building materials, roof tiles, and I think there was also one of those sort of roof windows, these sort of Velux windows anyway. But I think that a sort of interest in materials, in space, and sort of abstractions of space, and was display, we're all there, as well as I can trace it all back. As well as my uncle, the tailor, who had a big influence on me, my uncle George, or Georg, who was a sort of only culturally interested person in my sort of extended family, and who was a bit of a mentor, or was a very close ally of mine. Yeah, he was interested in culture
and collecting. I mean, he collected like mocha cups, he was like, this is, I come from a more or less working class family, so it wasn't like there wasn't any sort of educational refinement or anything like that. I'm also the first person who ever went to university in my family. But my uncle was sort of collected mocha cups and stamps, and he was interested in art, and he read a lot, and he was a bit of a dandy in a sort of in a small town. So he dressed incredibly well. So he definitely sort of evoked an interest in fashion in me, I suppose. And And he also had he had a very keen sense of cultural signifiers in a way, I think, as well. Like sort of what it means to wear what or something like that. I don't know. Yeah.
Wow. And he stayed in the town. He didn't.
He did. Yeah. He's an interesting case actually. We never knew he remained a bachelor all his life. We always thought he was a closeted gay man. But like I just couldn't say. But like then Mokka Cups and collecting of Hildegard Knef records surely is a bit of a giveaway on my gaydar. But yeah, see, he remained in that town, although he was very successful as a tailor and later in sort of running this men's fashion store. And he had job offers from, big cities. But he was very adamant that he wanted to ride his bicycle to this sort of store that he ran. And he loved nature and he just couldn't really imagine to live in a big city. Plus, he didn't have a driver's license. Neither do I, actually, yeah.
You don't have a driver's license? Well, you don't need one in London.
No, I don't.
Do you regret that, though, ever?
Kind of, yeah, because I do love the countryside, and I am tempted to kind of explore sort of inaccessible bits of the coast, but I can't, yeah.
And were you interested in pop culture? I'm just thinking about how it's sort of 80s, 90s
music,
so pre-internet times, obviously. Was it TV, MTV, music? What was it getting you interested in?
I mean, as I said, I come from a sort of kind of uneducated background, so to speak. And so pop culture, like for many of my peers who come from a similar background, pop culture was the way into, or subculture actually was the way into culture. So, MTV, all that sort of stuff, and magazines. I think magazines played a big role. Just sort of...
Which magazines did you get?
Just fashion magazines and also pop magazines. I'm not even sure that you know this. Like, and Bravo was a sort of magazine in Germany that teenagers would read. But they kind of gave you a whiff of something else than small town reality. And later on, I became a punk after a very, very brief goth phase. And it was, and this kind of led to a certain amount of
Was it shocking to be a punk in Emstetten?
I wasn't the first, I was only the third. I remember exactly who was the first. We called him Schneider Punk. He was very impressive. It was my mother. It was for my family. It was very horrible. Yeah, like my mother didn't attend my A-level celebrations because I had pink hair and they were so embarrassed about it. But that, again, that would not deter my uncle who who took me to fine restaurants with my pink hair. So that was a very different sort of, I think my parents were to some degree aspirational and my uncle just was what he was in a way, although he was, I don't know.
Are you still in touch with them all?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, my uncle sadly died. My father sadly died. My uncle died in 21. My father died just over a year ago. But yeah, my mum and I are very close, and all that sort of stuff is long past. And I'm very close to my family. Yeah, I would say. Yeah, what's left of them anyway.
Yeah. So when you came to London, so it would have been the 90s, and you went to Central St Martin's.
Very late 90s.
Very late 90s, okay. So sort of Britpop moment.
It is a Britpop. The first time I was in London was very late, actually, for somebody with the sort of cultural interest that I had. I came to London in 97, and it was literally, Blair had just won the election. It was all like Cool Britannia and all this sort of energy. But it wasn't necessarily Britpop or even the YBAs that brought me to London. I think it was more, or the reason why I wanted to live here and study here was more to do with the way that the city looked and the sort of architecture and the sort of collage of different architectural periods and the sort of fact that the British kind of made improvisation into a bit of an art form or something. In Germany after the war, everything was newly built and like you had this sort of almost scary surfaces that would like of one material that would extend, for kilometers, both on the walls of houses as well as on streets. And in the UK, everything seemed like patched up, and you wouldn't have one material extend before you would see a gap for more than a meter or something, and then something would be repaired. And all these sort of different layers of information and material, I think, was what totally fascinated me, as well as a sort of how densely or how like sort of different social classes and cultures would live very sort of close together in a way. Yeah.
Is that something, I know you've talked about how everything looks the same now in terms of surfaces with these tall shop fronts, and everything does look very homogenous. Are you somebody who feels nostalgic for that, or do you see it as the natural march of time?
I do feel a bit nostalgic, but I also, I'm cross with me for feeling that nostalgia, because I don't think that nostalgia is necessarily a very helpful sentiment. But I can't help but feel a bit nostalgic, yeah.
I loved reading about how your MA thesis at Central St Martin's was on the liminal space in horror films.
Yeah.
I found that great, because The Shining, you mentioned in particular, the opening scene in the hotel. So there was obviously an early interest there in spaces and architecture and mood setting.
Yeah. I mean, the MA thesis is a sort of takes the sort of shape of a guided tour through a fictitious hotel, and because there is this scene in The Shining where the chef kind of shows Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall around. Or actually, I think it's only her. He's having a conversation with somebody else.
He's having an interview, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly. And they kind of explore the different spaces of the hotel. So that's kind of my text. And but like I was really into horror movies at art school in Hamburg, and read a lot about the sort of spaces in horror movies, and I've also sort of produced at that time, in the sort of last years of my time at art school in Hamburg, I produced several interior models, sort of shrunken rooms where you could look inside from above, and one of them was one of those corridors from the hotel, from the Overlook Hotel in The Shining, and one of them is a barricaded room, and
the space is quite important.
Yeah, space is very important. Yeah,
work has a relationship to the space it's in. If someone buys one of your sculptures and takes it home, it'd be in a completely different context. Is that something that concerns you?
Not really, no. Once it's gone, it's gone. It's best not to see where they are as well. I mean, I've once been, like, I think one Untitled Force Field I did, like these sort of very big, like a single ring, and these are works that are based on the security gates at the exit of department stores, and somebody bought it in the US and installed it, and then they invited me and they installed it, and then when I went there, they made it the entrance to their library, which was fine in itself. It was meant to be a threshold, but they drilled through it, into the ring, and I was like, Jesus Christ.
When you're in art, can you say anything, or could you
no,
just?
Of course not. I mean, it's their thing.
Do you still feel a sense of ownership over the work when you see it in someone's home or gallery, or do you just think
it's best not to? I guess, but it's a funny thing. Yeah, it's a funny thing. But because also it's not only that. I mean, in this case, it was like a physical kind of destruction. But like, what's even worse is actually when you see what else these people buy. When you see your work is sort of amongst work that you don't like or something. Which I mean, it's not always that. There's also the opposite. Sometimes you feel very proud to, I don't know, be next to something quite amazing. And
what are you working on coming up after this show ends? Are you working on next project straight away, or do you take a break?
I wish I could take a break, but I can't really. I'm doing a show in a gallery in Munich called Deborah Chamoni, And it's the sort of first time I'm doing a show with her, although I think we met when we were 18 and both playing the drums in punk rock bands in Hamburg. But I'm a professor for sculpture in Munich at the art school, and so we kind of met there again. And that's going to be my first show there. So I'm have to crack on through the summer with work.
No holidays?
Not really, no. I kind of hope that it's going to be a bit of a, because I plan to produce the work in Munich as well, so I kind of hope that I can do that there, and kind of there. Deborah has this sort of house by a lake, so hopefully it's going to be nice as well. Maybe I do that during the weekend or something. Yeah,
that's great. That sounds really cool.
Mm.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Great chat.
Yeah. Okay.
You've been listening to In Talks with me, Danielle Radojcin. The sound and theme music is by Woogie Productions, and the artwork is by Patrick Wall. If you enjoyed this episode, please pass it on to someone who you think might also like it. Please subscribe and leave a review. Thanks for listening.